Hello my friends, Alyssa Neal here, dietitian and owner of Nourishment Nutrition. Today I am going to talk to you, we are going to talk about luteal phase, also known as PMS. I start the video like that because luteal phase or luteal phase, spelled Luteal, is one of the most demonized phases of the menstrual cycle, which is ironic because it delivers us a wide variety of information, not just on our physical bodies, but also on our emotional bodies. Luteal phase is typically, so if we look at the entire cycle, just to orient ourselves, we bleed, right? We have menses, then we come out of menses into follicular phase, and then follicular phase is typically, again, depends on the person, so I almost hesitate to even put numbers to it, but often it's around like 7 to 10 days. And then we have ovulatory phase when we are the most fertile, and ovulatory phase is the shortest phase. It's about, let's just say, 3 to 5 days. And then we move from ovulatory phase, so from the crescendo, from the place we are the most fertile, into luteal phase or luteal phase. And this phase is an untapped gold mine, to put it lightly. What do I mean by that? Well, in luteal phase, the lights, the reflection, the focus really goes from us being outward and focused on our goals and our achievements and our social connections and our ability to network and create and produce and try new things, and it turns in. And all of a sudden we begin to reflect. Our body is in this mode of, okay, I got you to a place where you were fertile so that you could create and so that you could be turned on and you could be, social networking and connecting. And now that we're realizing that, yes, creation happened, but maybe not in the literal, a baby was made, right, or an egg was fertilized. Now we're moving into this phase of looking at the creation and going, how did that go? How was that? What did we do well? What did we do not so well? What could we do better? What didn't feel so great, right? It's a time of heavy self-reflection, which requires an immense amount of energy. Now, secondary to that, and on more of a biochemical level, we also have this reflection happening literally biochemically, right? Where we are still in human incubator mode. Post-ovulation, so as soon as your body releases an egg to be fertilized, your body temperature increases. And you can see this if you're taking your temperature every morning. It might increase between, let's just say, 0.5 to 1 degree, okay? For me, I always notice, pre-ovulation, my body temperature ranges around 96.5, 96.7, 96. In that area. And then once I've ovulated, it's always a 97.3, 97.5, 97.7, 97.5, right? So you can see it bumps up. Not typically 1 whole degree all the time, but it's in that area. And it's a really obvious bump where you're like, my temperature has stayed higher. What's going on here? Oh, I must have ovulated. And now that it's higher, now that it's staying higher, that must mean that I'm in luteal phase, okay? Should you get pregnant, your temperature will stay high as you are now incubating a potential child. If you don't get pregnant, when you menstruate, when you shed the lining of the uterus, your body temperature drops back down and you go out of human incubator mode. But as we're talking about human incubator mode, or luteal phase, what are some of the take-homes in this? So actually, this is the phase that really went, Alyssa, pay attention, for myself and also seeing it in my clients. Stuff was happening like, oh my gosh, my appetite has skyrocketed. I'm craving more sugar. I'm craving more carbohydrates. Ooh, I'm noticing that my perception of my physical body has changed. When I look in the mirror, I feel huge. I feel big. I feel bloated. I feel, not at home in my physical body. And all of a sudden I was like, yeah, same. I experienced that too. And ironically, it went away when I was in high school when I lost my period due to extreme caloric restriction, right? So what could be the benefit of this? Instead of seeing all of this and going, ooh, that's crappy that we feel that way, we always have to ask, what is the purpose, right? Structure equals function. If we're retaining water, if we're slowing down, if we're not feeling as energized, there must be a reason for this. What is the reason? Okay. What is the reason? What are we missing here? What is exacerbating all of these premenstrual symptoms, and what is causing our bodies to, go into a syndrome, something that we call a syndrome, premenstrual symptoms, or premenstrual syndrome, or premenstrual disorder, right? These are all words that we see thrown around on commercials, at the doctor's office, in birth control information. What's happening? Why are we not cultivating an environment where our body's natural rhythm or cycle is thriving? And so this is where I started to dig. And what I realized is this very obvious information. So in the menstrual cycle, after we ovulate, our hormones dip down, our sex hormones. We get like a bump up in estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone at ovulation, and then they dip back down. But then during luteal phase, we get another bump up in progesterone and estrogen, and testosterone kind of stays lower, but luteal phase is progesterone dominant, and that's what accounts for our body temperature being higher. It also accounts for the fact that many people will say, I feel a little bit more tired, a little more introverted, I'm kind of more reflective. Those are effects of progesterone. Okay, progesterone is the shaper. It's very deliberate in its actions. It's not necessarily as happy-go-lucky as estrogen, but it does have really specific purposes, okay? Now, simultaneously to this, secondary, or this second spike in estrogen and progesterone, estrogen spikes, but progesterone is the dominant sex hormone of this phase. In addition to that, our brain's serotonin also drops. It's very subtle. It's not like, oh my God, we have to be so concerned, but it does happen. And serotonin is like the well-being hormone, right? At ovulation, for example, serotonin and dopamine, the "ooh, yeah, I feel really good" hormones spike. In luteal phase, our serotonin actually subtly drops. And this accounts for things like moodiness, increase in appetite, feeling more prone to feelings of anxiousness, feeling like we are kind of like, I don't really want to participate in anything right now, right? And obviously these things happen for a reason, because this is the time in the phase historically where it's our turn to slow down and reflect on what's going on, what went on at the beginning of the cycle, and how we can alchemize it or transform it to better serve us through the next cycle. However, in the culture that we live in the structure that we live in, we do not make time to slow down. So instead of slowing down and going, okay, I'm gonna reflect, meditate, do some yoga, take some hot baths, journal, have really meaningful conversation where I'm able to reflect and humbly go, I didn't do that so well last time, that didn't feel good, how can I improve? Instead, we run the hamster wheel of our culture's exaltation of productiveness, social interaction, hard, fast, working all the time. Meanwhile, our bodies are over here going, excuse me, please, can you slow down? And so while our bodies, via decreased serotonin and increased progesterone and a higher body temperature, which requires energy to sustain, while our bodies are chemically asking us to slow down, we are trying to push at the same pace. And this prompts us to push forward by artificial means. Often you'll notice that when people start to not feel good, because our brains and our bodies are so smart, we go, what offsets not feeling good? Caffeine, sugar, alcohol. All of these things have really certain biochemical pathways in the body. For example, if you increase your sugar intake, okay, because you're not feeling good, not only does it stimulate the nucleus accumbens, which is the pleasure center in the brain, but it also helps to shuttle tryptophan through the blood-brain barrier so that there's more tryptophan to use in the brain. What does tryptophan do? Tryptophan is an amino acid precursor, meaning it's a building block for serotonin. Okay? Now you might be sitting there going, okay, so why shouldn't I eat sugar if it's helping me to bring the building blocks into the brain? It's not that you shouldn't eat sugar, it's that you shouldn't dose yourself on huge doses of sugar so that you can feel good, so that you can be productive, so that you can push through at the same speed. Why not? Because over time, this creates an insulin resistance. This creates a resistance where we actually end up cultivating an environment where we need more and more and more sugar to get the same reaction that we would had we just been like, oh, I'm gonna have an apple with peanut butter. Something that's very normal, versus going, oh, I'm gonna have a hot chocolate with a Snickers bar and a donut in order to give me more energy so that I can do all these things I need to, which again, nothing wrong with those foods unless you are utilizing them in order to override the signaling that your body is giving you anyways, okay? Now, the same thing happens with caffeine. We do it with caffeine. Actually, in luteal phase, a very common hallmark is that you have a lower caffeine tolerance. If you overdo caffeine in luteal phase, you might start to feel really jittery. You might start to notice anxiousness. Because at the end of luteal phase, progesterone and estrogen drop off, we aren't actually protected as much from the effects of cortisol. Now, what do I mean by that? Essentially, progesterone, which is made from the same thing as cortisol, from pregnenolone, just the production of progesterone and estrogen buffer the effects of the stress hormone cortisol, okay? So, this is all happening. Brain chemistry changes, which affects how we perceive ourselves, which affects how we interact with our environments, which affects our drive. Now, our body's trying to biochemically turn us inward to reflect. If we are resisting it, we're not going to have a great outcome. We're not going to be able to enjoy the fruits of the labor of slowing down and turning in, because if you've ever done work where you're reflecting on a process or reflecting on an old programmed belief, reflecting on a habit that doesn't really serve you, it's a lot of energy because it's very humbling. And then not only do you have to go, ooh, that's not working so well, but you also go, how can I fix it, right? So there's that. Now, tertiary to all of this, and you could argue it's primary, because the body is holding itself at a higher incubation period, right, a higher temperature through luteal phase, that alone requires energy, okay, right? Calories are energy, energy is heat. So we typically notice our appetite increases, which is ironic because it's at the same time where we're going, oh my God, I'm so bloated, I can't eat as much, this really sucks, so I'm gonna just try to really restrict my diet. Now at the same time, not only is the body demanding more caloric intake, but we become slightly insulin resistant. That is proven that progesterone and estradiol, which is a form of estrogen, are both positively correlated or associated with slight insulin resistance. Now, insulin resistance is what happens when someone is diagnosed with diabetes and we say, oh look, your insulin, the key that allows sugar to go into cells to be made into chemical energy, isn't working quite well. It's not working at its maximum capacity. So you're insulin resistant, meaning you need more sugar, more carbohydrate, in order to stimulate the same base level of insulin, meaning you need more sugar to activate the key to let the sugar inside the cell to be made into chemical energy, okay? So we're restricting our calories because we're perceiving our body bigger, even though it's probably the same, maybe plus a little bit of water from bloating, from water retention. But again, even that has a purpose. It's trying to slow us down. It's prepping. We're making tissue in the uterine lining. And we're trying to override these systems, which have a very specific purpose to slow us down in a time when we're already putting out a ton of energy just existing as something that's trying to create new life. And we're overriding them, saying, no, fit into our system. That's where we get PMS. So it's our job to reclaim luteal phase and say, actually, this is a time of really potent reflection where I can be even more efficient as I come out of menses and into follicular phase the next time if I just take a deep breath, slow down, and allow myself to reflect on the experience that I've had and that I'm having. And that's the whole point of luteal phase. It's really a time to slow down, a time to reflect. It's, one of the times where we are most in tune with our bullshit meter, where we can go, ooh, I don't know about that. That's not working for me super well. And that's a superpower. So I challenge you to observe your cycle and observe what goes on in luteal phase. Do you notice flares of anger? Do you notice you're really exhausted? Do you notice more sugar cravings? If so, how can you dial it in so so that you can slow down and come to a point of complete cultivation